Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking about the new graphic novel, The Endless Game, and talking with the creative team behind that book, writer JD Amato. JD, thank you for being another JD in the room.
Thank you for having me, fellow JD.
Anytime, anytime. And artist, creator Sophie Morse. Sophie, thank you for bringing the wisdom to the
Of
room as well.
course. My pleasure.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Tell us a little bit, please, before we travel through some of the creative process. Tell us a little bit about the story because this is a middle grades graphic novel. I was a middle grades teacher for 8 years. So this is a space that lives very much in my heart.
Yeah, for sure. This is a story about a young boy named Fred who moves to a new town and learns that every kid in this town is part of a game of capture the flag that's been going on for 80 years, has been passed down from generation to generation. And it's all takes place among the kids. The adults are not allowed to be involved, but all the adults are very invested in the future of this game. But it's really secretly a story about finding your place in a larger structure and identity and all those things that sort of, when you're that age, you're trying to figure out for the first time. And, you know, playing out those summer games with friends is the sort of place where you can experiment with that stuff.
Nice, nice. As you're saying that, I'm thinking at 14 you figure that out, but then you keep figuring that out in your 40s. It just continues. The journey continues.
Yes, the process only begins in middle grade and then it never ends.
Exactly.
But it's funny because you bring up the middle grade being close to your heart. I think something that Sophie and I have talked about, a lot about is that, when we were kids, this middle grade graphic novel space didn't exist. And so we're very excited to be a part of it because I think I would have been all about this universe of books if it had been around when I was a kid. I don't know about you, Jason.
Absolutely, yeah. Anytime I could find something comic book-ish, which was very rare in school in an educational space in a bookstore, I was all about it. So I'm glad that it's thriving.
Totally.
Now, JD, you've worked in the world of television. What made comics the space for this story?
Well, it kind of ties into what we were just saying is, I was a very reluctant reader as a kid. I loved stories, but reading was just something that it took me a minute to sort of sink my teeth into. And so this was a story that felt like its audience was best served by the kids that are sort of the age of the characters. And I felt like this was a space that I would love to sort of time travel back and give a younger version of myself a book like this when I was a kid. And so it felt like a natural fit to sort of explore this space. Yeah.
And Sophie, what got you into the world of comics and comics making?
I definitely was a huge fan as a kid. I collected a lot of my own middle grade graphic novels actually in college. But when I was a kid, I used to read a lot of my brother's like Tintin comics in particular. I always was just really into the illustrations in particular. Like it was just such an appealing style. And then when I eventually went to study illustration in college, I couldn't get away from comics. The style of it, the ease of reading just really appealed to me. And I've been collecting comics, both of the Tintin variety and um, like more middle grade graphic novels since then.
Nice. What was the collaborative process like? What was going on behind the scenes as the book was coming together?
It's funny because I've talked about this with a lot of people, and I feel like what I'm learning is that the amount that Sophie and I worked together on this book was like unusual. I think there's a lot of times where people just are like, great, it's written, and then it goes to Illustrator. But Sophie and I really worked together on this book for, most steps of the process. When we first sort of found each other and got connected, I think we both had the same aspirations for it. This is a double debut, so it's both of our first sort of full length graphic novels. And I think there was a certain amount of like excitement and maybe even naivete that like powered both of us of being like, let's put everything into this. So throughout the writing process for me, I can speak to like I was constantly calling Sophie up and running story moments by her and talking through things that were sort of in my mind and seeing if they resonated with Sophie. And There's even characters that Sophie was a big fan of that like seeing Sophie get excited made me sort of start putting them more into the story. Shout out to Silent Sarah. Um, but yeah, on the writing side, we collaborate a lot, and Sophie can speak to the other parts of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Pretty similar experience when I was in the middle of illustrating and drawing. It was constantly kind of checking with JD and being like, does this look cool to you? Or like, does this match the vision in your head? Or, how can I make this stronger, as an outside view? Especially with I do this with my other illustration work. I consult kind of other kind of non-illustrators and I ask, does this make sense? Like, does it read? It reads to me as the person drawing it, but to your average, consumer reader, does it make sense? So it was kind of a constant check-in, um, and just making sure that our vision's aligned.
And a lot of Sophie being like, just send me more trees, more images of trees. I'm stuck in a tree world and I need new images of trees.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of like utilizing JD by being like, I need you to gather 1,000 pounds of reference so that I don't have to.
Which I love to do. It was very fun.
Nice, nice. What was it like to go from kind of writing for the television world to writing for the comics page?
It was so much fun. One of something that I talk about in the TV world is that, it's not really an auteur art form. It's a giant collaborative work. And so, like, on shows that I've done, there'll be 160 staff members that all put their fingerprint on it, and then network executives and marketing teams and all this stuff. And so, that's a really fun sort of process that, is fulfilling in a lot of really specific ways. And then getting to work on something like this, where really it was, Sophie and I got to drive the vision of this and dive into it. And writing wise for me, not having to worry about, you know, how we could afford to shoot something or make something. I mean, the only person who that to the chagrin of that was Sophie when I'd be like, all right, and now there's 100 bikes, there's 100 kids riding bikes.
There was an
Um,
emotional toll to pay.
yes, there's an emotional toll to pay, which is, that the emotional toll is free. So we'll just keep going with that. Um, but it was really fun. And I think also, you know, graphic novels don't fit in a box narratively. I'm someone who I'm not a believer in sort of the sort of standard story structure of things, and so being able to sort of feel out the shape of this story and not have it have to fit a prescribed box at all was a really fun process. And being able to tell the story both through writing and then also through the illustration and find ways to sort of depict things differently. Whereas, a lot of film and television, we have to be very deliberate in how we're depicting our story and where it fits and how it fits into its timing blocks. And for this, we could really be a lot more free form, and we could take time to go have little side stories or tell parts of the story that don't necessarily fit into other parts. So it was really fun. I really, really loved it.
I have looked through a review copy of the book that came in PDF, so I can confirm it's quite a beautiful book. And back to that question of references and all of the time that went into the art side. Uh, Sophie, what did you want to make sure that you captured that you brought through in the visual style?
I really wanted it to be appealing. I really wanted there to be kind of like a tactile feel to it, almost gritty in a way. I didn't want it to look too clean, too polished. I wanted it to feel, kind of outdoorsy in a way to match the feeling of the story and where it takes place, which is the majority outdoors. Yeah, kind of a grittier vibe at the same time. Um, with graphic novels, something that's important to me personally is not only does, the story have to be interesting to me, the art has to match it. So I really wanted to make sure that, my work was at the same level of quality, as the writing. So there's a lot of work put into that.
And something Sophie did that I thought was amazing is that there's so much life and character into every detail. And I think, it's what makes the process so hard. But for me, writing it and then seeing what Sophie put on the page was just, every tree branch and flower and every background character sort of implies a story, which is kind of part of the ethos of the story we were trying to tell, was that, there's not really there aren't really side characters in life. They're not background characters. And so the fact that, every aspect of the illustration was handled with such care and had such life to it and sort of implied its own storytelling was really amazing to sort of behold as the illustration started to unfold.
Sounds like you two had a wonderful team up happening, and I hope being a debut, I hope it continues. Maybe the next time 1,000 bikes, maybe
Yes,
on the page.
perfect.
Yeah, that's the
Sounds
narrative
great.
progression is just more bikes means that the story is progressing.
That's right. That's right. Well, if I'm a listener and I want to find out more about either of you, about the book, where are some places I might go to do that?
I
So if you want to
know.
hit it.
Yes, I got it. I know for me, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Sopharium, Sopharium.
And on Instagram, I'm j.d.amato. And you can look for the Endless Game wherever books are sold. We can finally say the thing is that you can just, your library, your local bookstore, everywhere you buy books. So we're excited about it.
Wherever the finest books are sold. Absolutely.